Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Hello, welcome to World Anchors Network, brought to you through Parrot TV, based in New York City. And I am Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host here in Houston, Texas. Check out our website, www.worldanchors.com, for fine literary content, poems, essays, literary criticism, contemporary cultural thinking globally. We're working on a global network here, so please take a look and have some excellent thoughts presented your way. So today, our show, we've invited Dr. Randy Overbeck, who has a new book, Abigail Trench. Dr. Randy Overbeck is an award-winning educator, best-selling author, popular podcaster, and speaker in much demand. After serving children for almost 4 decades as teacher, college professor, and school leader, he used those experiences and skills to craft captivating mysteries, thrillers, and historical suspense. His novels have earned more than a dozen national awards, including Thriller of the Year, Best Book Award, the Gold Award, and Mystery of the Year, and have garnered hundreds of 5-star reviews on Amazon, Goodreads, and BookBub. His newest novel, Abigail Trench, is a historical suspense about the Revolutionary War, released June 2026 by Diversion Books and distributed by Simon & Schuster. Dr. Overbeck is also the host of the popular podcast, Great Stories About Great Storytellers, which reveals the little-known backstories of famous authors, directors, and poets, and ranks among the top 50% of all podcasts in the USA. When he is not writing or podcasting, he is much demand as a speaker, sharing informative and entertaining programs to more than 300 groups all over the country. I'd like to welcome Dr. Randy Overbeck to our program today. I hope, let's see if I can get this. Okay, there we are. There is Randy. It's good to see you again. We have a couple other shows. We interviewed you for previous collections of literary indulgence, and it's really nice to see you again after all this time. I'm pleased to hear you're making some traction with your work and seeing a lot of progress and getting more people to read and think and engage with the literary field. So it's good to have you today, and I hope all is well there. So Abigail Trench, this is your new novel. It's based in the Revolutionary War period of the United States, and that's a very exciting and interesting period. And I'm curious, after writing this book, you wrote it on a female spy of that period. How do you think information control is used for political purposes?
Well, in 1776, and unfortunately, much the same as it is today, a lot of what we would call media in those days was broadsheets, newspapers, flyers. Much of what filled those pages was, in fact, propaganda. And the propaganda was either British, if the proprietor leaned in that direction, or if it was, or rebel, or patriot, if they were sympathetic to the cause. And sometimes it was a mixture of both. There are some places where they started off one way, and then partway through the war, the proprietor of the broadsheet shifted and they saw which way things were running and decided to support that side as well. But in all cases, today we talk about a partial uh, partisan press, but it was what we have today is nothing like what it was in those days. Those days, they often simply just invented stories. It wasn't a take on a story. It wasn't a opinion of how things were. It was often just blatant exaggeration or lies. If that helped advance the loyal cause, or if that helped advance a massacre done by the British, was described as a courageous victory over the disreputable rebels, when in fact
Hmm.
what really happened was that, in the one example that I talk in my second book about the Baylor massacre, that literally a group of militiamen were sleeping in a field, and a rebel regiment came upon them, and instead of asking them to surrender, they went and bayoneted half of the group while they were still sleeping. But in the press, it came out as this wonderful, these guys were courageous and they defeated this terrible menace who had been menacing the countryside. That's just one example.
Hmm. Yeah, so they just kind of, padded over a lot of the violence and the intentions and what was going on for whatever the cause may have been. So it's sort of a fragmented culture in that respect as well. We see a lot of that today still. I think you're correct in saying that it's a little less of a problem to a certain degree because there's so much information. I can fact check everything and whatever. But yeah, definitely back then it's a little bit less of a direct line to furthering your opinions and what you think may be going on. You can't just go look online to a website and check the alternate side of that. Definitely very interesting how this information is kind of monopolized in a way, and you don't really get the full picture. So, what efforts did you take to construct Abigail Trench's character and maintain her personality throughout the novel?
Well, I did a good deal. I did a great deal of research. So first of all, this will not surprise any of my longtime readers. Abigail Trench, my hero in this story, is a teacher. In each one of my books, all of the protagonists, all of the heroes are in fact teachers, because teachers have always been my real heroes. So when I write fiction, they become my fictional heroes. And I did research on what life was like for a teacher and that particular time. I spent a lot of time looking at original sources, trying to figure out what a teacher would like, what a woman teacher, a female teacher would likely know. What would her education be like, even though her education was in England, not in America? And then what she would likely be doing in the book, as they will soon, they'll find very shortly after a few chapters in, that she, although she came to America to teach in a small room schoolhouse, she ends up having I won't go into the details, but the small room schoolhouse has to close because people move away, and she moves to the big city, and the only teaching jobs she could find are teaching children in rich people's homes. And she ends up in the home of a rich British officer. Hence, it aligns her with the rebel cause at one particular point. I worked really hard to get this female character right, and tried to make sure that the things that she would do, the feelings that she would have, were legitimate. I'm very lucky, Dustin. I have a very significant group of beta readers that read my work in progress. So as I am writing the book and as I'm putting these pieces together, I will lay this out for them. Most of them, not all, but most of them are women. And they are not shy about telling me, no, a woman wouldn't react that way. A woman wouldn't do this. A woman wouldn't do that. So I use that information, I use that knowledge to help make sure that what I've crafted is at least believable. At least it would be likely that that would happen. Abigail, as I have put it together, is a very resilient, very courageous young woman, living in a very difficult and dangerous place. And she's able to make the most of it because she stays focused first on her first job, which was educating children. And then she takes on this second job of being part of the Culper Ring, the George Washington spy ring.
It's fascinating, and I think it's important to highlight some of the female contributions to that period and how that helped protect our, America's revolutionary interest, as we see a lot of the, repression of through gender, the imbalances going on right now, and people trying to shut women out of education and are making those arguments, and just forgetting that, that's the way they're framing all that is so, it's a bad construct. So how have your personal observations of people, I mean, as a teacher and so forth, how does that impact your ability to write, and the psychology to all help develop the narrative arc of your stories?
Well, I think, one of the things that that has been a kind of a central theme of the education part, the school part, the teacher part of my stories, is that I don't feel that education is valued nearly as much as it should. The truth is, it isn't valued nearly as much as it is in many other countries. In Germany or in France or in Japan, or the teachers are held in much higher regard than they are in America. So I wanted to kind of extend that issue, extend that arc, if you will be, into this older story. And it was even more true in Abigail's day in 1776, that teachers were looked upon as pretty much the same as cooks or as servants or as liverymen. They were there to do a job that had to be done, but the job wasn't really that important. They are pretty much regarded like all the rest of the servants were in those days, like furniture, which actually works to my advantage, because it allows Abigail to be in a space, in an area where secrets are being divulged, and they couldn't care less that a teacher's overhearing it, because she's just a teacher. She doesn't know anything. She's not important.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're asking me, how does the one arc work with the other? In this case, I worked backwards to kind of illustrate that this lack of respect for what teachers do is very real. And what I attempted to do, and this is an interesting thing, Dustin, because the reality is that most people, if you talk to parents, if you talk to people that are engaged in education, they generally will have a very high regard for their children's teacher. If you ask them about, what's your daughter's second grade, what is her teacher like, or what is your son's AP teacher in high school? Nearly always, according to surveys, the responses are very positive. But if you ask people in general about the value and the importance of teachers, you get a very different response. So I portrayed that in the book in the same way, in the sense that the parents that Abigail is serving, she actually serves two sets of parents in the story, a patriot family, and then later a British family. Both families recognized her ability to be able to get to the kids that they had trouble doing that, and be able to help the kids learn. But even at the same time, the culture that they exist in doesn't really give teachers any credence at all, doesn't give them any priority. Their pay is poor. I mean, all of those things which we now suffer from originate from that particular period of time. So that's part of the arc I was trying to create backwards in the book.
So you kind of embedded a little bit of a theme there that was part cultural criticism of the value of education, the valuing of people that are, I guess, intellectual workers who are, also caregivers in a lot of ways, that outside of the just, instructing people, they tend over the flock, so that's definitely an important approach to looking at this at sort of cultural neglect of the general teaching profession. Very, very good. I think that's a good part of the story there. So what exactly brought you to writing this novel? Was there like a moment where you kind of felt inhabited by the story, or did you have a distinct purpose for writing it?
Well, that's a very good question. I've been a big fan of the Revolutionary War for a long time. I've read a whole lot of both fiction and nonfiction about the Revolutionary War, about principles in the Revolutionary War. And I stumbled, that's kind of the best word, I stumbled upon the story of this particular woman. So For those who don't know, I made a reference to the Culper Ring. So the Culper Ring was, we can talk a little more about that later. The Culper Ring was a secret spy ring organized by George Washington that had a different kind of espionage network than the world had ever seen before that particular time. And that network, from our best historical resources, consisted of 6 men and 1 woman. And during the war and after the Revolutionary War, though the identities of those individuals were so secret, were kept so close to the vest, that no one knew who they were, including George Washington, except for George Washington's immediate contact. I'll explain that in a minute. All the rest of the members in the Culper Ring were unknown to everybody else except their immediate contact. In fact, Dustin, this was such a big deal that the most important member in the Culper Ring, he's given the name of Culper Jr., his name is Robert Townsend. We did not know his identity until the 1930s. And it was discovered somewhat by accident by historians that they were comparing personal correspondence of Robert Townsend to correspondence that they have record of in the Culper Ring. That's how they found out he was. And to get to my story, the woman has never been identified. So historians they argue, they have different theories as to who this woman is. We have very little information. It goes back to what you were saying about history and society overlooking the contributions women make. In the historical records, the Culper Ring records, all she's referred to as the lady. And she has a number like all of the Culper Ring operatives had. Her number is 355. And though we know those 2 things, and we know some of the secrets that she helped uncover that helped win the Revolutionary War. That's all we know. So I took those disparate pieces and tried to craft a character who could, in fact, have overheard those secrets and could, in fact, have a rationale, a reason, a motivation for being willing to do the very dangerous work that spy work was. And that's how I came onto this particular story. It's a story that's largely never been told. Abigail Trent, or whatever her real name is, I made up Abigail Trent, obviously. She's been lost to history, and basically hardly anyone even mentions her. Even if you read the 2 very good books about the Culper Ring, The Secret Six, and I'll come up with the other name in a minute. She is mentioned, but only in passing. There's not any significant information attached to her. So I wanted to tell her story, or to tell a story of a woman who likely could have served in that role, that pivotal role for the Revolutionary War.
That's a really honest and a very profound approach to the writing. It's not just a fiction, a piece of fiction. I mean, you're crafting an entire person out of what we know of what remains of her story, to highlight, some of the neglect of this person, and not just her, but the entire cultural persona of femalehood and what women offer, and not just women, but educators, and that's had to have been a really dangerous job for her to have taken on, and kind of getting in her head and her motivations and what made her decide to do this. It's pretty intense work, I say. So was it difficult to craft this female character as a male writer? And how have readers, particularly female readers, responded to your portrayal of Abigail Trench?
First of all, I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. So at the very beginning there, I have some notes when you first start the book that explains that Abigail Trench is fiction. The character has been created based on these historical details, but most of everything in the book is historically accurate. So I've made sure to place her exactly where she would have done through, had she lived in what she had to live in New York City, what New York City was like, what the fire of New York City was like. I take readers through real things that occurred, like the hanging of Nathan Hale, the execution of Thomas Hickey, the attempted assassination on George Washington. All of those pieces are actually pieces pulled from the historical record. And I use that to build the narrative of Abigail Trench. Now, to your question about, well, how did I deal with that, her being a woman and I'm a man? And that's a very legitimate question and one I work hard at. I've had several books that have had a female protagonist, so this is not something new to me. Again, I use other people's voices to help make sure that I am rendering this voice of this protagonist voice in an authentic manner. I do have a big advantage. I spent 40 years working in education, and I spent 95% of the individuals, the adults I interacted with, were women. So I have learned over a long period of time to listen to women, to listen to how they speak, to listen to what they want. And I will be honest, all of my female characters, including Abigail Trench, have elements of actual female teachers, female educators that I have known, I've respected, and I build that into the character. I think that helps. I think, improve the authenticity. The response now, the book's only been out a little more than a month, but the response has been overwhelmingly incredibly positive. Readers, female and male, find Abigail believable, credible, and we didn't really mention this, but the story is as much about her story of resilience and dealing with tragedy and finding a way to deal and come back from that. It's as much her story as it is the story of the cult perspiring and the American Revolution. It is those two issues combined. I'm always ready to listen to other voices, and especially female voices, to help educate me and improve my ability. But so far, the response has been outstanding.
Well, that's great. It sounds like a really intriguing thing. And no good character and profound character in a novel is born in a vacuum. You do take pieces of who you've known historically in your personal life, and because that's like immediate material, and you feel it more deeply. I think it channels it better, and you can make it's not completely, you're not telling that person's story, but you are kind of piecing together your experience there. And so that's a really interesting way to craft the story. So in researching the material to put this era together, the Revolutionary period, I'm just curious, did you find any interesting facts or information that maybe you weren't familiar with that really surprised you?
As I mentioned, going in, I've been a student of the American Revolution for years, for probably 2 decades, and over that time have read all kinds of books, everything from Gore Vidal's 1972 fiction called Burr, which tells the story of the American Revolution from the perspective of Aaron Burr, which is absolutely fascinating, all the way to Valiant Ambition, which is a book by Nathaniel Philbrick that tells the intersecting story of George Washington and Benedict Arnold. During all of that time, it has always been in the back of my mind that there were great stories waiting to be told here. When I did, the research was harder. First of all, there are lots of great historical work that's been done. So there is good work that I was able to draw on for things like, what did the street look like? What did people wear? How did they deal with weather? What did the houses look like? Several of the scenes take place in a pub. So what did their pub look like? So I was able to get resources that had descriptions on most of what I wanted. There's some of it is fictionalized, but most of those. And for the Culper Ring, we're very lucky because almost all of the Culper Ring dispatches were saved by George Washington and are now digitalized, and you can access them through libraries that have copies of this. So I was able to get a sense of that, and others have done good historical work around the Culper Ring. So I was able to piece a lot of that together. It's harder. It's not harder. It is more demanding than my earlier books because the level of research has to be so much higher to be able to make it feel like the reader is walking in 1776. This era is so different from what we think of, what we remember, what we're used to, that it's very difficult. And when I discovered, here's one example of the fascinating things that I've built in the story. I think by now, I didn't know when I was going through school, but I think by now there is starting to be some talk about the fact of an attempted assassination on George Washington in summer of 1776. Believe it or not, there's actually 3 different records of what actually was that assassination attempt. So that historical record is somewhat muddled. But here's what's not muddled. Washington, for reasons I don't want to go into today, chose to execute only one member of this very large conspiracy that set out to assassinate him. He had a very specific reason for doing that, and he did that very publicly. The man was one of his bodyguards. So he had 4 bodyguards, and they were called lifeguards in those days. And one of those lifeguards, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Hickey, was part and parcel of this conspiracy. Was caught, confessed, and actually ended up being executed. Here's the really amazing part. When he was executed in a field outside New York City, based on contemporary reports, there were somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people that witnessed this execution. But until I did this research, I had never even read about this. That's the largest group ever to execute an execution anywhere in America. And it was completely wiped out of the historical record. Washington did not record it. The record we have is from people who attended this and then wrote about it to their family. You don't believe what I saw happen today. So that's just one example of the many things that I discovered. Here's another one. This fascinated me. In New York City in 1776, if you were walking down the street, it was very likely that you would encounter a mixed race couple, a black man with a white woman, although usually it was a white man with a black woman. Freed. That was a common experience, even though in that city at the same time, there were landholders that had slaves, black men and women, enslaved doing their work. And somehow the culture tolerated both that, didn't see any cognitive dissonance between, here's this mixed race couple, didn't even give them a second thought. Walk a little further down and there's a black slave working for his master. I found that just fascinating. And I found that a couple of times in the historical record.
Wow. That is definitely an interesting way of people to tolerate whatever's around them, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, if it's ethically, contrasting. That's a very interesting. I think that still happens today. I think people they just like to look over the problems and the contradictions of how we treat each other, and don't even think anything of it. Because it's part of what we are accustomed to, and that's very interesting that they had that sort of lifestyle and that culture at the time. So I have one question, and then we'll break, and then we'll come back to you reading a portion of Abigail Trench. Did any other historical novels influence your construction of Abigail Trench, and how did reading similar fiction influence your creating of this novel?
Yes, the novel I made a reference to, and this is not a novel that is largely, of course, the novel was printed, the novel I mentioned, Burr by Gore Vidal, was released in 1972. So it's a long time ago. And I probably stumbled on it, I don't know, certainly not in 1972, probably in the 1990s sometime, and found it, and I was fascinated. Gore Vidal is a wonderful writer. I don't like all of his work, but this was absolutely fascinating. And what he was able to do was he was able to do what I'm aiming to do. He created New York from 1776 into the 1820s, because that's when Burr lived. And he helped you see houses look like, what the streets look like, what people look like. And because in the very beginning of the book, he says that the opinions expressed in here are not his, they're Burr's. So don't confuse the two. So he portrays in this story a very different perspective of what we think of the founding fathers. He has a very different portrayal of George Washington as somebody who's had this huge ego and he was after glory. And it's a very, what it does is it created enough cognitive dissonance for me to go, maybe things were not quite as rosy and as perfect as it was portrayed to us when we were given our American history lesson. So it kind of set that up. I also read a book about Hamilton's mistress that helped inform me with some other details and stuff. But most of what I have read is nonfiction about this era. I'm talking about as you probably know, I'm a big fiction reader and writer. But in this era, there's been several really good books. The two books about the Culper Ring, the one about Nathaniel Philbrick, I've read 1776. I've read Washington. There's a lot of, and I drew from all pieces from all of those to be able to craft a compelling narrative, a credible, compelling narrative. And so far, based on the reviews, I think I've accomplished what I wanted.
That sounds, I mean, that's a lot of work, and it's very intriguing, the process, and it's, you really have to love knowledge and digging deep into people to create such a compelling story and use it to portray even kind of like reflecting on the present and how we still have some embedded attitudes and approaches and way we view each other, kind of using history as a lens to even review the contemporary mold of life we live in. So I'm going to show some of your slides here as we break and allow our viewers to get an idea of this book. And I think it'll be very nice if they get a look at the cover, and a little deep dive into the some of the promotional material. So here is some of that stuff right now.
All right.
So yeah, that's a nice promotional poster there. It's very compelling. It shows you a very thoughtful person there. You're kind of, reflecting deeply on the process, and that's a very nice looking cover. It's gorgeous. I think it's very, it just gets your attention and sort of brings the mood into focus. There's a lot of mystery and sort of mystique to it. So I'm going to bring up the next piece, and this is the cover image here, and that's interesting. That gives a very odd perspective. You see the woman, and obviously this is Abigail Trench, and she's watching the redcoats kind of making their plans and what have you, and sort of getting this this knowledge and understanding from them as well, and trying to relay the information back. And you don't really see her face there. That's a really compelling way to portray her, because then that mystery there and that person, you don't really it kind of gives her another mystique, and so I think that's really an interesting way to frame the cover there and draw the readers in. Okay, so I'm going to show this last piece, and
all the credit goes to the publisher. They're the ones that did that. They did a great job.
Yeah, they did a really nice job. I think that's I think the colors and everything, I think it really gives the mystique of of the approach of your narrative. So yeah, and this is a good marketing angle here, looking for a fun way to dive into our nation's 250th anniversary. How about a captivating read about the lone female operative of Washington's spy ring? Quite compelling, gives people motive to jump right in and try to learn something new they didn't know, and get some look into that era and sort of look into it. And even when you're reading, you kind of like fall into the book. You become part of it in a way. And I think drawing people in is really the trick of good fiction. And I appreciate definitely the research and depth and the some of the lessons that even apply today that you've used this story to tell us. And I think that's extraordinary. So I'm going to go ahead and bring us back on to the screen here. And so we have, Randy is he's a very great fiction writer. He's written several books, and he has about a three-page sample of Abigail Trench he would like to share. So let me know when you're ready to bring that in, and I'll bring you up here to speak on it.
All right, I am ready.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna put you here by yourself, so you go forward.
All right. Okay. This is actually part of a chapter from about the center of the book, and it's a part where Abigail, our hero, who had met and come to start to have a relationship with Nathan Hale of fame. Nathan has been caught and is getting ready to be hung, and she, with the help of her friend, finds a way to get into the camp to watch his hanging, and this is that section. Standing there, cringing behind a tent, helplessness swept over her. Back on Long Island, her efforts were useless against the rapist. At the execution of the couple, she was powerless. Now Nathan was going to be hanged, and she was simply going to watch. "Bring out the prisoner," the officer demanded. Everyone in camp stopped what they were doing and stared. The soldiers stood and faced the gallows. The boys with the cannonballs froze. Silence fell. The sentry by the greenhouse stepped through a small door and reemerged with a tall, blond man. Oh, God, Nathan. Hands bound, he walked erect and unbowed. He didn't look beaten. His face was unbloodied, clothes intact. Even from the distance, you could make out the scar on his face. He stopped in front of the officer. Nathan's gaze moved around the camp, stopping on her side. Very deliberately, Abigail slid the hood off the hood of her cloak and shook out her hair. She stared and thought she saw recognition dawn in Nathan's eyes and concern. "Does the convicted have any last request?" the officer announced in a formal manner. Nathan's voice was quiet but carried over the hushed camp. "If I'm going to meet my maker, could I have a few minutes with the minister first?" Abigail hoped this might give him precious minutes, perhaps enough for a miracle. The officer's response was quick. "Spies are not entitled to last rites." He cleared his throat, but his next words came out phlegmy anyway. "Escort the prisoner to the gallows." The guard poked Nathan and he stepped up onto the platform. The guard set his rifle down and placed the noose over his neck, cinching the knot tight. Abigail closed her eyes and swallowed hard. Remembering she asked to be there, she opened them. Oh, kind, considerate man. She bit her lips. The officer marched to the platform. "Nathan Hale, you have been convicted of high treason and spying against His Majesty and sentenced to death. Do you have any final words?" Nathan looked out at the crowd, his glance sweeping slowly and stopping where Abigail, Jamie, and Robert stood. His eyes were bright, his stature proud. When he spoke, his voice boomed. "I regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." So like Nathan, patriot to the end. But damn, this was no academic exercise. The officer nodded. The guard pulled the plank. Nathan dropped. Abigail heard the sick tug of the rope and the choke of breath. She closed her eyes, tears rushing down. From all over the camp, soldiers hollered jeers and catcaws, peppered with nervous laughter. Commotion drew her attention back. A soldier climbed onto the platform, hung something next to Nathan's dangling body, and ran off laughing. "Take that, Herr General. You're next, you maggoty coward. We got another news for you." Robert whispered, "I think it would be prudent if we made our exit now." Jamie said, "Agreed. Follow my lead." Tears blurring her vision, Abigail followed the men. As she turned, she saw what hung next to Nathan, a wooden plank with a crude painting of a soldier and the word Washington scrawled above it. She pulled her eyes away. I'll stop there.
And it's quite compelling, I think, and it does bring a lot of the experience to life. And I like especially that you don't get too abstract and overly decorative in your language. There's a lot of the direct and sense, kind of sensation of how you describe different things, like the falling of the noose, and you use the word sick, I think, and things of this. Like, it doesn't really, it doesn't feel like you're getting too carried away in description, and the words and the choice of language really direct impact on the of what you're actually writing about and saying directly. And so I think that is a really strong aspect of the writing style itself. So I really appreciate what you how you've written that, and it's very interesting. And I also love the underlying themes that you take as as an educator, and use that, also your experiences, and bring that kind of heroic aspect of this story out. And you have this common educator, teacher, wife, maybe, and she becomes sort of lost in this as broad historical moment, very important piece of history that is unforgettable, and yet she gets forgotten in the long term. And you bring her character back to life and sort of resurrect her there. It's pretty nice. I like the approach and the theme there. So one more question. As we here in America, we were going into our 250th independence anniversary as of this year, July 4th. So I'm curious, did writing this novel maybe inspire patriotism or appreciation of the events of that period that shaped our founding? Or maybe did you feel some doubts about the motivations or intents of the founders as you visited this historical era?
Well, as I mentioned, I've been a big fan of Revolutionary War information for a long time. And one of the things that I think as I delved into the research for this, and I should mention before we finish that Abigail Trench is the first of 4 books in the series about individuals in the Culper Ring.
Okay.
The second one I'm actually finishing this next month. It will be out next year anyway. But one of the things that I learned was I don't think I had a sense of the degree to which everyday people, not just Washington, not just Adams, not just Franklin, not just Jefferson, but everyday people bore the brunt of trying to accomplish what we so dearly hold, what we hold dearly now. It was 25,000 men and a few women died fighting for this war. Washington didn't die. I'm not saying he should have, but I meant there are lots of these everyday men that are just lost to history, and actually a few women that died in battle too. We kind of forget that. The other thing is that what I've attempted to craft in my stories is just how difficult life was, and how dangerous it was, and what chances these people took to be able to be a rebel, as they were called in those days, to be a patriot, and look the British in the eye and go, no, we're not doing that. I think we've lost a lot of our respect for what it took to birth that part of our nation. I've got a lot of education. I've got a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD. One of the reasons I love research is because I did so much of it for my PhD. But in my exposure to American history, my teachers did not do a very good job of at least sharing with me, and I don't think the teachers who worked for me did either, of trying to convey to us what the real important things about history is. That history is about real people, everyday people like Abigail Trench, who sacrificed, who put their lives on the line, who did whatever they had to do to be able to get us to the next stage where we could actually enjoy freedoms. We could actually get around to writing a constitution, to writing the Bill of Rights. because none of that was even feasible in 1776. We were subjects of the king. We were expected to do whatever the king and his minions wanted to be done. And the idea that they birthed that, no, we're not subject to anyone. Government's job is to serve us. It would help us today to kind of remember what they went through and try to refocus government so the government is about serving the people, not the other way around.
Absolutely. It's a very pertinent lesson. And I think revisiting that period and getting some ideas about the approach and the motives of why they went to this risky, kind of action to kick off the imperialist and the crown to get a freedom that we now take for granted to a large extent. And even in a lot of ways, we subvert our own freedom and sort of throw it away and forget how valuable it is. And I know a lot of people globally say, looking at, today, many Americans, I think they just sort of live this way and they don't think it's a thing. But, other people in other parts of the world don't have this, this economic growth and liberty that we do in many ways take for granted. So I think that's a really good lesson to the risks that were put there, to get this and gain it, and just sort of the rapid development of history from both very educated and brave people who fought for this revolution and crafted our current structure and so forth based on how they understood human nature and those things. So I think it's really good to look into that, even if it's individually, not outside of your own personal. If you're in university and they're not giving you that, then go and find it, in the library or somewhere. But yes, thank you so much for writing this. Would you like to share some, inspirational words or thank yous to followers, fans, anything like that as we conclude the program today?
I would be delighted to do that. And what you were saying reminded me of one other really important thing I learned that I think is kind of pertinent. Everyone today, from liberal to conservative, but this is especially for my conservative friends, which I have many, like to honor Jefferson. They like to throw about the founding fathers. Well, here's one piece I learned from my research. In 1776, Jefferson, Hamilton, Adams, all of those individuals that we hold in such high regard were considered far left radicals. In 1776, based upon historians' best estimates, somewhere between only 30 and 40% of the people were in favor of breaking with England. Right. So what our founding fathers did was something very much out of the norm. It was not something that the people were behind them and we need to do this. They took a chance and tried to establish this new nation of freedom. That was not where people were. And they showed tremendous courage and leadership in doing that. So sometimes when we get so busy trying to put a label on this other one, we need to kind of look beyond that and go, well, what are they really trying to advocate for here? I have been very great. I have been very lucky to have really wonderful. I want to give a big thanks to Diversion Books and Simon and Schuster. I've wanted for a long time, and my wonderful agent, Ellen Scordato of Stone Song Agency, and they helped make this a reality. My goal was, when I started writing this about 3 years ago, maybe a little more than that, I was wanting to get this book out and to people in time for the Sesquicentennial, for our 250th celebration. They made that possible, and I am very grateful to them. I'm very lucky. As you mentioned at the outset, my books have been honored with more. Now the awards are more than 15 different national awards, and I feel honored and humbled with those honors. And by now I've got thousands. I wish I had hundreds of thousands, but I got thousands of fans who keep coming to me and saying, "Are you going to do another Haunted Shore mystery, or what's next in this series?" I'm very grateful to them. They kind of keep me centered and keep me focused on doing what I need to do best, and that's right.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being on the program today, Randy. I wish the book the best of luck, and then in future books you write, hopefully they'll gain some momentum and you'll get those hundreds of thousands of fans. It'll be nice to see. You've been a supporter of our program for quite some time, and been on here, I think 2 or 3 times separately, and always intriguing to hear what you have to say. You're very good at giving insight into the creative process and how books are born. So thanks for being on the program today. It was great to listen to you. Wishing you the best, and hope you have a great day. This has been World Inkers Network. We had Dr. Randy Overbeck discussing his book, Abigail Trench. Take a look at it, find it, read some reviews. It would be great to have you as a reader of his fiction. And I would like to also invite you to check out our website, www.worldinkers.com. Check it out and give some reading into these essays and poems and various international voices coming together on the platform to pursue humanistic understanding, global togetherness. We're just looking for outreach and people to come and share their ideas and their literature and their thoughts on ongoing things, AI, whatever it is. If you got concerns, write an essay, send it to us. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at publication.worldinkers@gmail.com. And I hope you guys out there getting your pens ready and starting to scribble some stuff and getting that momentum going. I hope you guys out there really enjoyed the program. It was great to talk with Dr. Overbeck, and I hope to see him again. Keep a lookout for World Inkers Network, and we hope to see you again soon. You guys have a great afternoon, evening, wherever you may be, and I hope you will get to writing. Thank you. Have a great day.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot.